David walked through the automatic doors of the New Horizons Adoption Center, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the paperwork in his folder. The building looked nothing like the old orphanages he remembered from movies. Instead, it felt more like a space station from a science fiction film, with curved walls that glowed softly and air that smelled faintly of ozone, and something sweet he couldn't identify. He had been thinking about this moment for months. Ever since his wife passed away 2 years ago, the house had felt too quiet, too empty. At 42, David wasn't sure if he was ready to be a father, but something deep inside him kept whispering that maybe, just maybe, he could give a child the love they needed. The receptionist, a kind woman with gray hair, smiled at him warmly. "You must be David. We've been expecting you. Let me get Rita to show you around." Rita appeared a few minutes later, a cheerful woman in her 50s who had worked at the center since it opened. "First time visiting an interspecies center?" she asked as they walked down a long hallway lined with colorful artwork clearly made by children. David nodded. "I'll be honest, I'm nervous. I've never even met anyone from another planet before." Rita laughed gently. "Don't worry. Kids are kids no matter where they come from. They want the same things: love, safety, someone to tuck them in at night, and help them with homework. Though I will say some of our children do have special needs that human kids don't have." They passed several common areas where children were playing. David saw a group of human kids playing with what looked like floating blue creatures about the size of house cats. In another room, tall, thin beings with 4 arms were helping smaller children build something with blocks that seemed to glow from within. "That's amazing," David whispered. "The Zentarian children love to build," Rita explained. "They see in dimensions we can't even imagine, and those little blue ones are from Kepler 442b. They're actually quite intelligent, even though they look like pets to us." As they walked deeper into the facility, David noticed the hallways branching off into different sections. Signs pointed to areas labeled with names he couldn't pronounce, each with symbols he'd never seen before. "Each species has different environmental needs," Rita explained, noticing his confusion. "Some need more oxygen, others less gravity. We do our best to make everyone comfortable." They entered a section marked Zephyrian Wing, and immediately David felt the temperature drop several degrees. The lighting here was softer, almost blue-tinted, and he could hear a gentle humming sound coming from the walls themselves. "The Zephyrians are very sensitive to light and sound," Rita said quietly. "They're also empathic, which means they can feel what others are feeling. It makes them wonderful companions, but it also means they feel pain very deeply." They walked past several rooms, where children were engaged in quiet activities. Some were reading books with symbols that shifted and moved on the pages. Others sat in meditation-like poses, their skin glowing faintly with soft, pulsing light. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Rita said, her voice becoming gentler. "But I want to warn you first. She's been with us for almost a year now, and she's had a very hard time." At the end of the hallway, in a small alcove with a large window looking out at a garden, sat a small figure. David's breath caught in his throat when he saw her. She appeared to be about 9 years old, with pale blue skin that seemed almost translucent. Her hair was white as snow and fell in soft waves around her shoulders. But it was her eyes that stopped him in his tracks. Large, silver eyes that seemed to hold all the sadness in the universe. "This is Kira," Rita whispered. "She's from Zephyr Prime. Her planet was, well, it's gone now. She lost her family during the evacuation." David felt his heart break a little just looking at her. Kira sat perfectly still, staring down at her hands folded in her lap. The patches of skin on her arms and neck that glowed softly in other Zephyrian children were barely visible on her, as if the light inside her was fading. "She hasn't spoken much since she arrived," Rita continued. "The empathic abilities that most Zephyrians see as a gift have become overwhelming for her. She feels everyone's emotions, and after losing everything, all she feels is pain." David took a step closer, and for just a moment Kira's eyes flicked up to meet his. In that instant he felt something he couldn't explain, a connection, a recognition. It was as if she could see right into his soul and knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything that mattered. "Has anyone tried to adopt her?" David asked quietly. Rita sighed. 3 families have tried. But living with someone who can feel your every emotion, especially when they're carrying so much grief themselves, is harder than most people expect. Strange things happen around her when she's upset. Electronics stop working, plants wither, lights flicker, the families got scared. David watched as Kira returned her gaze to her hands. He thought about his own grief, how he still sometimes woke up reaching for his wife's hand, how he still set 2 coffee cups in the morning out of habit. Maybe this little girl who felt too much and this man who had been trying not to feel anything at all could help each other. "Can I sit with her?" he asked. Rita looked surprised but nodded. "Of course, just be gentle, and don't be discouraged if she doesn't respond. She's built walls around herself to try to block out all the pain she feels from others." David slowly approached the alcove and sat down in a chair across from Kira, careful not to get too close. He didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly, watching the garden through the window. After a few minutes, he began to speak softly. "I lost someone very important to me too," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who made everything make sense. And when they were gone, the whole world felt different. Sadder. Emptier." Kira didn't look up, but David noticed her shoulders relax just slightly. "I know I'm a stranger," he continued, "and I know you can probably feel how scared and nervous I am right now. But I also want you to know that I understand what it's like when the sadness feels so big that it might swallow you whole." For the first time since he'd sat down, Kira lifted her head just enough to glance at him again. This time, she didn't look away immediately, and in that moment, David knew with absolute certainty that his life was about to change completely. 2 weeks later, David stood in his driveway holding Kira's small suitcase, watching as she stepped out of the social worker's car. She moved slowly, like someone walking through thick water, her silver eyes taking in everything but showing no emotion. The afternoon sun made her blue skin look almost ghostly, and David noticed she squinted and turned away from the bright light. "Remember," the social worker said quietly, "she needs dim lighting most of the time. Too much brightness hurts her eyes, and don't be surprised if electrical things act up around her when she's upset." David nodded, though he didn't fully understand what that meant yet. He was about to find out. The first night was the hardest. David had prepared a room for Kira with soft lighting and comfortable furniture, but she barely looked at it. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her jacket, and stared at the floor. When David brought her dinner, a special meal the adoption center had taught him to make, she took only a few small bites. "Are you tired?" he asked gently. "It's been a long day." Kira nodded slightly but didn't move. David wasn't sure if he should leave her alone or stay. Finally, he sat down in a chair across the room and picked up a book, reading quietly while she got used to his presence. Around midnight, she finally laid down, still fully clothed, and fell into what looked like an uneasy sleep. The next morning, David woke up to find his coffee maker blinking random numbers and his microwave clock flashing 12 Tinas over and over. His phone had mysteriously lost all its battery even though he'd charged it overnight. When he went to check on Kira, he found her sitting in the corner of her room looking terrified. "It's okay," he said softly. "I think you had a bad dream. Sometimes when we're scared or sad, our bodies do things we don't expect." Over the next few weeks, David learned that living with Kira was like living with a very sad, very powerful ghost. She moved through the house silently, barely eating, barely speaking. Every few days, something strange would happen. The lights would flicker during dinner, the television would change channels by itself, or his laptop would shut down for no reason. The neighbors started to notice too. Mrs. Peterson from next door mentioned that her garage door had been opening and closing. Randomly, the streetlight in front of David's house would go out whenever Kira walked past it during their evening attempts at fresh air. David's brother called almost every day. "This isn't normal," he would say. "You're in over your head. That kid needs professional help, not a single dad who doesn't know what he's doing." There were moments when David wondered if his brother was right. One particularly bad night, Kira had what could only be described as a panic attack. She curled up in the corner of the living room, her whole body shaking, and every electronic device in the house went crazy. The smoke alarm started beeping, the dishwasher turned on by itself, and all the lights in the house flickered like a disco. David didn't try to touch her or force her to calm down. Instead, he sat nearby and talked to her in a steady, quiet voice. "You're safe here," he kept saying. "I'm not going anywhere. You're safe." It took almost an hour, but eventually Kira's breathing slowed down and the electrical chaos stopped. When she looked at him, her silver eyes were filled with what looked like shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the first word she'd spoken in days. "You don't need to be sorry," David said. "You're dealing with feelings that are too big for anyone to handle alone. We'll figure this out together." David started researching everything he could about Zephyrian children and their empathic abilities. He learned that her species felt emotions much more intensely than humans, and that trauma could cause their bioelectric fields to become unstable. He bought books, watched online videos, and even joined support groups for families with empathic alien children. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after Kira moved in. David had been looking through old photo albums, something he rarely did anymore, because it made him too sad. But he thought maybe sharing his own story might help Kira feel less alone. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a glass of water she hadn't touched. "Can I show you something?" he asked, sitting down next to her with the album. He opened to a picture of his late wife, a woman with kind eyes and a bright smile. "This is Lisa," he said. "She was my best friend for 15 years. She got sick 2 years ago, and the doctors couldn't help her." Kira looked at the photo, then at David. For the first time since she'd arrived, her expression changed. Her eyebrows drew together in what looked like concern. "She looks nice," Kira said quietly, her voice like a whisper. "She was," David said, turning the page to show more pictures. "She loved gardening and terrible jokes and ice cream for breakfast. When she died, I thought the sadness might kill me too. I didn't know how to live in a world without her." Kira reached out one small blue finger and touched the edge of a photo. "I had a family too," she said, so quietly David had to lean closer to hear her. "My mother grew crystals that could heal people. My father made music that painted colors in the sky." "Tell me about them," David said. And for the first time in almost a year, Kira began to talk. She told him about her home planet, where the cities floated in clouds and the trees sang lullabies at night. She told him about her younger brother who could make flowers bloom just by laughing. She told him about the day the sky turned red and the evacuation ships came, and how she got separated from her family in the chaos. As she spoke, tears rolled down her cheeks, but the lights in the house stayed steady. The electronics behaved normally. It was as if sharing her story had somehow calmed the storm inside her. "I feel everyone's feelings," she explained. "All the time. At the shelter, there was so much sadness and fear and worry that I couldn't make it stop. It got louder and louder until I couldn't think about anything else." David nodded. "What about now? What do you feel from me?" Kira was quiet for a moment, her head tilted like she was listening to something only she could hear. "Sadness," she said. "But not the angry kind. And something else. Something warm." "That's hope," David said. "I haven't felt it in a long time, but it's there. You helped me find it again." That night, for the first time since she'd arrived, Kira came out of her room during dinner. She still didn't eat much, but she sat at the table with David and asked him questions about his job, about the neighborhood, about what school might be like. It wasn't a complete transformation. They still had hard days ahead. But something had shifted. The house felt less empty, less haunted by sadness. And when David tucked Kira into bed that night, she looked up at him and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," David promised. "We're family now. Family doesn't give up." 3 months into their life together, David started to notice small changes that gave him hope. Kira began leaving her room in the mornings, drawn by the smell of coffee and the sound of David humming while he made breakfast. She would sit at the kitchen table, still quiet but present, watching him move around the kitchen like she was learning how a normal morning was supposed to work. Her empathic abilities, which had once felt like a curse, slowly began to serve a different purpose. David would come home from particularly stressful days at work, and before he could even hang up his jacket, Kira would appear with a glass of water or simply sit nearby in comfortable silence. She seemed to know exactly what he needed without him having to ask. "How did you know I had a headache?" he asked one evening after she brought him aspirin without being asked. "I can feel it," she said simply, "like a tight rubber band behind your eyes. It happens when you think too much about sad things." David was amazed by her insight. She was right. He had been thinking about his wife, wondering what she would think of their new life together. The real breakthrough came when David decided it was time for Kira to start school. He had been homeschooling her with materials the adoption center provided, but he knew she needed to be around other children. The principal, Mrs. Roberts, was nervous about having their first alien student, but she agreed to try. "We'll start slowly," Mrs. Roberts said during their meeting. "Maybe half days at first until she gets comfortable. And if there are any problems with the other children." "Kira is very gentle," David assured her. "She's more likely to help other kids than cause problems." Kira's first day was challenging. Children stared at her blue skin and silver eyes. Some whispered to each other, pointing when they thought she wasn't looking. But Kira's empathic abilities gave her an advantage that no one expected. During recess, she noticed a boy named Tommy sitting alone on a bench looking miserable. While other children played, Kira walked over and sat beside him. "You're sad," she said matter-of-factly, "and scared. Someone was mean to you." Tommy looked at her in surprise. "How did you know that?" "I can feel feelings," Kira explained. "Like hearing music, but with emotions instead of sounds. The mean feelings are loud and sharp, they hurt." Tommy nodded. "Some older kids said I was stupid because I can't read as fast as everyone else. They laughed at me." Kira was quiet for a moment. "On my planet, my brother couldn't make crystals grow like other children. He felt stupid too, but he could make flowers bloom just by being happy near them. Everyone has different gifts." "What's your gift?" Tommy asked. "I can tell when someone needs a friend," Kira said, "and I think you need one right now." From that day on, Tommy and Kira became inseparable. But more importantly, other children began to notice that Kira had an unusual ability to help people feel better. She could sense when someone was having a bad day and would quietly offer comfort in small ways, sharing her lunch with someone who looked hungry, sitting with children who seemed lonely, or simply being present when someone was upset. Her teacher, Ms. Johnson, was initially worried about having a student with such unusual abilities, but she quickly realized that Kira was like having a junior counselor in the classroom. Whenever tensions rose or conflicts started, Kira seemed to know exactly how to calm things down. "She's remarkable," Ms. Johnson told David during a parent conference. "I've never seen a child with such natural emotional intelligence. She's helping students I've struggled to reach all year." At home, David and Kira settled into comfortable routines. She helped him cook dinner, learning about human food while teaching him about Zephyrian customs. She told him about the Festival of Lights on her home planet, where families would release glowing lanterns that carried their hopes into the sky. In return, David shared stories about his childhood, about holidays with his family, about the traditions he wanted to pass on to her. One evening, while they were working on homework together, Kira looked up from her math book and said, "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think my family would be happy that I'm learning to be happy again?" David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I think they would be proud of how brave you are, and I think they would be grateful that you found someone to take care of you." "I think Lisa would like me too," Kira said thoughtfully. "I can feel how much you loved her, even though she's not here anymore. Love doesn't disappear when people do." That night, David realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the people they had lost or pretending the sadness wasn't there. It was about finding ways to carry that love forward, to honor the people who were gone by building something beautiful with the people who remained. Kira was learning to control her abilities too. The random electrical problems mostly stopped as she became more emotionally stable. Instead, she began to use her bioelectric field in helpful ways. She could make dead batteries work a little longer, help computers boot up faster, and even make the old radio in the kitchen pick up stations more clearly. "It's like the energy follows my feelings," she explained to David. "When I'm scared or angry, it goes everywhere and breaks things. But when I'm calm and focused, I can direct it." Their neighbors, who had once whispered about the strange occurrences around David's house, began to appreciate having Kira around. She helped Mrs. Peterson's arthritic hands feel better just by being near her. She could sense when elderly Mr. Chen was having one of his bad days and would convince David to check on him. The house that had once felt empty and haunted by grief now felt warm and alive. David would catch himself humming again, something he hadn't done since his wife died. Kira's laughter, rare but genuine, had become his favorite sound in the world. 3 months after Kira started school, she came home with exciting news. "Ms. Johnson wants me to help with the new student," she announced. "He's from Earth, but he just moved here from another state and he's really scared and sad." "That sounds like a perfect job for you," David said, smiling as he watched his daughter, because that's what she had become, his daughter, practically glow with excitement about helping someone else. As they prepared dinner together that night, David marveled at how much their lives had changed. The scared, silent child who had barely been able to function was now a confident, caring girl who used her unique gifts to make the world a little brighter for everyone around her. But the biggest changes were still to come.